Today's story follows the emotional journey of Beatrice Harrington, a 75-year-old executive who faces shocking betrayal from those closest to her. This tale explores themes of family deception, professional ambition, and the complicated path to healing broken trust. Set against the backdrop of corporate America, we'll witness how one woman's strength and dignity triumph in the face of heartbreaking disloyalty. This story will especially resonate with those who've experienced family betrayal or career disappointments later in life. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Beatrice Harrington, and at 75 years of age, I never expected my greatest betrayal would come from my own family. I'd built Harrington Solutions from nothing more than an idea at my kitchen table over 40 years ago, nurturing it through economic downturns, technological revolutions, and personal hardships, until it became one of the most respected marketing firms in Chicago. The morning of April 15th began like any other spring day. Sunlight streamed through the windows of my lakefront condo, illuminating the framed photographs on my mantel. My late husband Terrence smiling beside me at our 50th anniversary, my son Preston in his graduation cap and gown, and his wife Vanessa holding their twin daughters at their baptism. I straightened my navy blazer and secured my pearl earrings, checking my reflection one last time before grabbing my briefcase. Today is the day, I whispered to myself, reviewing the speech I'd prepared for the board meeting where I would accept the position of executive director, the culmination of my life's work. My phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. "Car trouble. Don't worry. I'll pick you up in 20. We can't have you late for your big day." I felt a flutter of gratitude. Vanessa had always been so considerate since she married Preston 12 years ago. With my arthritis making driving increasingly difficult, her offer was a godsend. I replied with thanks and settled in to review my notes one final time. When the doorbell rang, I gathered my things, feeling the weight of expectation and accomplishment. Vanessa greeted me with her usual brilliant smile, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, designer sunglasses perched atop her head. "Ready for your crowning moment, B?" she asked, taking my briefcase. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, following her to the gleaming black SUV parked at the curb. The drive was pleasant at first. Vanessa chatted animatedly about the twins' school projects and Preston's recent business trip. I nodded along, my mind partially occupied with mentally rehearsing key points from my acceptance speech. It wasn't until we turned onto Lakeshore Drive heading south instead of north that I frowned. "Vanessa, dear, you're going the wrong way. The office is north, in the loop." She adjusted her grip on the steering wheel. "Oh, there's construction on the usual route. I'm taking the alternate way the GPS suggested." That seemed reasonable enough, so I relaxed back into my seat. But as minutes ticked by, and we ventured into neighborhoods I rarely visited, unease began to grow in my stomach. "Vanessa, where exactly are we going? The meeting starts in 30 minutes. "Don't worry, B. I've got everything under control," she said, but something in her tone had shifted. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cool efficiency that sent a chill down my spine. When she finally pulled into the parking lot of the Shed Aquarium, my confusion turned to alarm. "What on earth are we doing here? Vanessa, I need to get to the board meeting immediately." She turned to face me, removing her sunglasses deliberately. "The board meeting started 15 minutes ago, B, and you won't be attending." "What do you mean I won't be attending?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but panic was rising within me. "This is nonsense. Take me to the office right now." Vanessa's face remained impassive. "Preston and I thought you might enjoy a day at the aquarium instead. It's so peaceful here, don't you think?" "Much better for someone your age than the stress of corporate politics." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Someone my age. Vanessa, I'm the founder and CEO of Harrington Solutions. Today is the board vote for executive director, a position I've earned through decades of hard work. Now please, take me to the office immediately." She sighed, glancing at her watch. "It's too late, B. The vote will be finished by now." Cold realization washed over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. You did this on purpose." Instead of answering, she pulled out her phone. "Look, I got you a senior membership to the aquarium. They have wonderful exhibits that change seasonally, and there's a lovely cafe inside with a view of the lake." My hands began to tremble. "And give me your car keys right now, or I'm calling a taxi." "Be reasonable, B. Your arthritis makes it difficult to drive in city traffic, and taxis are so unpredictable these days. She reached over to pat my hand, but I recoiled from her touch. Why don't we go inside, have a nice cup of tea, and talk about your future? Preston and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time you enjoyed your retirement. My retirement. The words felt like acid on my tongue. I never announced any intention to retire. Vanessa's expression softened into something resembling pity. The board has been concerned about your age. B. Preston has been fielding questions for months now. They want fresh leadership, new ideas. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal? I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with shock. I'm calling Preston. He's in the board meeting, Vanessa said smoothly, presenting his vision for the company's future. He can't answer right now. The implications of her words hit me like a physical blow. Preston is presenting for the executive director position. My position? Vanessa nodded, her eyes calculating. It makes sense, doesn't it? He's been with the company for 20 years. He knows your methods, your vision, but can adapt them for the modern market. The board sees him as the perfect compromise, honoring your legacy while moving forward. I looked down at my phone, trying to steady my breathing. Opening my social media app, I scrolled through recent posts until I saw it. A photo posted just 10 minutes ago by Marjorie from accounting. The conference room, filled with board members. And there at the head of the table stood Preston, my son, raising a champagne glass with a triumphant smile. The caption read, "Congratulations to our new executive director, Preston Harrington. A new era begins today at Harrington Solutions." My phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the car floor. The world around me seemed to blur as I stared at the phone lying face up on the car floor. Marjorie's post still visible on the screen. 43 years of building a company, of early mornings and late nights, of missed vacations and postponed dreams, all culminating in this moment of utter betrayal. "B, are you all right?" Vanessa's voice sounded distant, as though she were speaking to me from underwater. "You look pale." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached down, retrieved my phone with trembling fingers, and called for a rideshare. Vanessa tried to protest, but I silenced her with a look that must have conveyed the full measure of my fury and hurt, because she immediately fell silent. "I trusted you," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Both of you." Vanessa had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's not what you think, B. Preston has been concerned about you. The stress, the long hours. At your age, it's not healthy. Stop saying, 'at your age,' as though I've become incompetent," I snapped. I built Harrington Solutions when Preston was still learning to tie his shoelaces. I navigated the dot-com crash when experts said we wouldn't survive. I pivoted our entire business model during the pandemic, while Preston was hiding in his home office, paralyzed with indecision. My rideshare app pinged, indicating my driver was 3 minutes away. I gathered my purse and briefcase. "B, please." Vanessa reached for my arm. "Let's talk about this reasonably. Preston only wants what's best for the company, and for you." I jerked away from her touch. What's best for me? Was it best for me to be humiliated in front of the entire board? To have my own son conspire behind my back? The car pulled up alongside us, and I opened the door. "Tell Preston not to come to Sunday dinner this week. I think we all need some time to reflect on our priorities." The ride to my condo passed in a haze of disbelief and pain. I thanked the driver mechanically and made my way upstairs, grateful that none of my neighbors were around to witness my distress. Once inside, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto my sofa, still wearing my carefully selected blazer and pearls, my power outfit for a day that had gone so terribly wrong. My phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. Congratulatory messages from colleagues who assumed I'd willingly pass the torch to Preston. Emails from board members expressing their gratitude for my years of service, and excitement about the new direction under Preston's leadership. A text from my sister in Arizona. "Saw Preston's announcement online. Didn't know you were retiring. Call me?" And finally, a message from Preston himself. "Mom, we need to talk. Coming over tonight at 7. This is for the best. I promise." I stared at his message for a long moment before typing my reply. "The security desk won't let you up. I've revoked your access." Then I turned off my phone, walked to my bedroom, and for the first time since Terrence's funeral 5 years ago, I allowed myself to cry. Deep, heaving sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. Morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains when I finally opened my eyes, still wearing yesterday's clothes, my face stiff with dried tears. For a blissful moment, I forgot the events of the previous day. Then reality crashed back, and the hollow feeling in my chest returned with full force. My phone lay dead on the nightstand, and I left it there. Instead, I shuffled to the kitchen, made a pot of strong coffee, and carried a steaming mug out to my balcony. The April air was crisp but not unpleasant, the lake a vast expanse of blue stretching to the horizon. Chicago's skyline stood proud against the morning sky, a city I'd helped shape in my own small way through decades of business connections and community involvement. What now, Beatrice? I whispered to myself, wrapping both hands around the warm mug. My life had revolved around Harrington Solutions for so long that I struggled to imagine myself without it. Even after Terrence died, the company had given me purpose, structure, community. Now I felt adrift, betrayed not just professionally, but personally by the two people I had trusted most. The buzzing of my intercom interrupted my thoughts. "Mrs. Harrington, there's a Ms. Zubair here to see you," the security guard announced. "She says it's urgent." Fatima Zubair, my executive assistant for the past 15 years. I hesitated, then pressed the button. "Send her up, please." Moments later, Fatima stood at my door, her usual professional demeanor cracked by evident concern. In her arms was a cardboard box. "They're clearing out your office," she said without preamble. I grabbed what I could before Vanessa started supervising the process. I stepped aside to let her in, noticing how she carefully placed the box on my dining table. "Coffee?" I offered, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "No, thank you." Fatima remained standing, her hands clasped tightly together. "Mrs. Harrington, I need to tell you something. I've resigned." This surprised me more than it should have. "Fatima, you don't need to do that. Preston would be lucky to have you." Her expression hardened. "I didn't sign up to work for Preston, or for the kind of company that treats its founder this way." She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "Before I left, I made copies of certain documents, emails between Preston and several board members dating back 6 months, strategy discussions about the leadership transition, meetings scheduled at times they knew you couldn't attend." I stared at the small device she placed on the table. "You're saying this coup wasn't spontaneous?" "Far from it." Fatima's voice shook slightly. "They've been planning this since last fall. And Vanessa..." She paused, seemingly reluctant to continue. "What about Vanessa?" I prompted, though part of me dreaded the answer. "She was the architect of yesterday's diversion. There are emails where she specifically suggests keeping you away from the board meeting." Preston initially objected, but she convinced him it was the only way to ensure a smooth transition without. Her words were, "emotional disruption from Mom." I sank into a chair, feeling as though the air had been knocked from my lungs. "I see." Fatima sat down across from me. "There's something else. The financial reports Preston presented to the board yesterday, they were manipulated to show that the divisions under his leadership outperformed those you directly managed by nearly 20%. "That's impossible," I said. "And the medical accounts division has been our strongest performer for the past 3 quarters. "Exactly." Fatima tapped the flash drive. "It's all here. The real numbers, and the ones he presented." I looked at my loyal assistant. "No, my friend," and saw the righteous anger burning in her eyes. For the first time since yesterday's betrayal, I felt something other than hurt and shock. A small flame of indignation began to flicker within me. "What do you suggest I do with this information, Fatima?" She leaned forward. "That depends on what you want, B. Do you want your company back? Or do you want your son to learn that actions have consequences?" A difficult question indeed, one that would require careful consideration of not just my professional legacy, but my personal one as well. The next morning, I awoke with purpose rather than despair. After Fatima left, I'd spent hours reviewing the documents she'd provided, each email and spreadsheet fueling my determination. By midnight, I had formulated a plan, one that would require precision, patience, and every ounce of business acumen I'd acquired over my long career. First, I needed to understand the full extent of the situation. I charged my phone and, bracing myself, scrolled through the accumulated messages. Among them was an official email from the board secretary, Desmond Wells, with the subject line, board meeting minutes, and transition agreement. The attached document detailed not only Preston's appointment, but also my retirement package, a generous financial settlement that, according to the minutes, I had agreed to in advance. There was even a digital signature on the document that certainly resembled mine, though I had never seen the agreement before, let alone signed it. This was more serious than I had initially thought, not just a betrayal, but possibly fraud. I called my personal attorney, Vivian Montgomery, who had been handling my affairs since before Preston was born. Vivian, I need to see you immediately. It's about Harrington Solutions. 2 hours later, I sat in Vivian's elegant downtown office, watching her face darken as she reviewed the documents. "This is actionable, Beatrice," she said finally, removing her reading glasses. "The forged signature alone is grounds for serious legal proceedings, not to mention the falsified financial reports. We could file for an emergency injunction to prevent Preston from making any major company decisions pending investigation." I gazed out the window at the city skyline. What would that do to the company's reputation, to our client relationships? Vivian's expression softened. "You're still thinking like a CEO, protecting the company even now. I built it, Vivian. 43 years of my life. I can't just burn it down. Even if my son..." I couldn't finish the sentence. "What do you want to do, then? Because doing nothing is not an option I'm willing to present." I turned back to face her. "I want to be strategic. Preston may have learned business from me, but he clearly didn't absorb my ethics. He's made a critical error in judgment, thinking that at 75, I'm too old and too tired to fight back." A slow smile spread across Vivian's face. "So, what's our first move?" "Contact Desmond Wells. Privately. He's served on that board for 30 years, and while he may have gone along with Preston's plan, he'll be horrified to learn about the forged documents. His reputation for integrity is too important to him." Vivian nodded, making notes. "And after that, I need to speak with Wallace Kingsley at Meridian Healthcare. They're our largest client, and they specifically requested that I personally oversee their upcoming rebranding campaign. If Preston has assumed that account, you think Meridian might reconsider their contract if they learn you're no longer involved? I think Wallace deserves to know the truth before he finds himself working with someone who thinks falsifying financial reports is acceptable business practice." By the time I left Vivian's office, we had outlined a careful strategy that would pressure the board without publicly damaging the company. As I stepped onto Michigan Avenue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Harrington? This is Lena Ortiz from Meridian Healthcare's marketing department. I'm calling because we just received a very strange email from Harrington Solutions, stating that you've retired, and our account will now be handled by a junior team under Mr. Preston Harrington's supervision. Is this correct?" I smiled, walking with renewed energy despite my arthritis. "No, Miss Ortiz, that is not correct. In fact, I was just about to call Mr. Kingsley about this very issue. There appears to have been a misunderstanding at my company. One I intend to rectify immediately." "I'm relieved to hear that," she replied. "Mr. Kingsley specifically brought your firm on because of your personal expertise. He's been trying to reach you since yesterday. Please tell him I'll be in touch very soon. And Ms. Ortiz, thank you for calling me directly." As I ended the call, I realized that perhaps my son had underestimated not only me, but also the relationships I'd built over the years. Relationships based on trust, integrity, and consistent delivery of excellence. Relationships that couldn't simply be transferred to a new leader through a boardroom coup. For the first time since seeing that devastating social media post, I felt a glimmer of hope. This battle was far from over. The next 3 days unfolded like a carefully orchestrated chess match. I operated from my condo, transforming my dining room into a command center with Fatima voluntarily serving as my right hand. Together, we reached out to key clients, not to undermine the company, but to clarify the leadership transition process, a phrase that raised enough questions to make several major accounts put their projects on hold pending on further clarification. Meanwhile, Vivian had her conversation with Desmond Wells, which went exactly as I'd predicted. The elderly board member was appalled to learn about the forged retirement agreement and immediately demanded an emergency board meeting to address the issue. Preston tried calling me 17 times. I ignored every attempt. Vanessa sent flowers with a card that read, "Family should talk things through. Please call us." I donated the arrangement to a nearby nursing home. On the 4th day, at precisely 9 a.m., I walked into the Harrington Solutions headquarters for the first time since the betrayal. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, not my usual conservative business attire, but a striking red power suit that had been a gift from Terrence on our last anniversary. Red means business, he'd said with a wink. Today, it meant war. The receptionist's jaw literally dropped when I entered the lobby. "Mrs. Harrington, we weren't expecting you." "Evidently not," I replied pleasantly. "Is the board meeting in progress?" "Yes. They started about 15 minutes ago in the main conference room." "Perfect." I made my way through the open office area, aware of the hushed whispers and wide eyes following my progress. Many employees nodded respectfully or offered tentative smiles. A few even whispered, "Good luck," as I passed. When I reached the conference room, I paused, taking a deep breath before pushing open the heavy door without knocking. The conversation inside ceased abruptly, as 12 heads turned toward me in unified shock. Preston, standing at the head of the table, my usual position, froze mid-sentence, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to guilt to something resembling defiance. "Mother," he said, recovering quickly. "This is unexpected. We're in the middle of an important meeting." "I'm aware," I replied, my voice steady. "An emergency board meeting called by Mr. Wells to discuss certain irregularities in the leadership transition." I nodded to Desmond, who gave me a small, solemn nod in return. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately afterward?" Preston suggested, his eyes darting nervously to the board members. "I think not. Since this meeting concerns me directly, I believe I have the right to participate." I moved to the empty chair beside Marjorie from accounting, who couldn't quite meet my eyes, perhaps remembering that her social media post had been the first confirmation of my son's betrayal. "Mrs. Harrington," Gregory Tate, one of the newer board members, spoke up. "We were given to understand that you had agreed to this transition, that you were ready to enjoy retirement after your remarkable career. Were you indeed?" I placed my briefcase on the table and removed a folder. "That's fascinating, considering I never signed any retirement agreement." I slid copies of the forged document across the table. "Yet here's my supposed signature on paperwork I never saw until yesterday. Would anyone care to explain how that's possible?" The room fell silent. Preston's face had gone pale. "Furthermore," I continued, "I've been informed that the financial reports presented at the last board meeting contained significant, let's call them discrepancies." I distributed another set of documents, the actual financial reports alongside Preston's manipulated versions. "I believe the board deserves accurate information when making decisions about the company's future." The tension in the room was palpable as board members reviewed the documents, murmurs of concern growing louder with each passing moment. "This is outrageous," Preston finally burst out. "You're trying to undermine me because you can't accept that it's time to step aside. The board voted based on fraudulent information," Desmond Wells interrupted, his authoritative voice silencing Preston instantly, and potentially under false pretenses regarding Mrs. Harrington's wishes. "I move to rescind the previous vote and launch a formal investigation," said Lydia Chen, another long-standing board member. "If these allegations are true, we have a serious governance issue to address." "I second the motion," Desmond added immediately. Preston looked desperately around the table, seeking allies but found none. Even those who had supported his ascension now regarded him with suspicion. "Perhaps," I suggested quietly, "my son would like to explain himself to the board. How exactly did my signature appear on a document I never saw? And who authorized the alteration of official financial reports?" All eyes turned to Preston, whose confident demeanor had completely crumbled. In that moment, despite my anger, a mother's heart ached at seeing her child cornered by his own poor choices. But the time for maternal protection had passed. This was business now, and in business, integrity was non-negotiable. Preston's explanation was both pitiful and illuminating. Under the steady, increasingly disapproving gazes of the board members, he admitted that Vanessa had been the one to suggest helping me transition to retirement. We both thought, that Mom would resist stepping down despite her age, he stammered. "The signature, Vanessa has access to Mom's digital files from when she helped organize her home office last year. She thought it would be easier this way, to present Mom with a fait accompli." "And the financial reports?" Desmond Wells asked, his voice frosty. Preston's shoulders slumped further. I adjusted them to strengthen my case for leadership. The actual numbers still show growth, just not as dramatic as what I presented. Falsifying financial information to the board isn't an adjustment, Preston, Gregory Tate said. It's potentially fraud. The emergency meeting extended for 3 more hours as the board grappled with the implications. Eventually, they reached a unanimous decision. Preston would be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, and I would be reinstated as executive director until a proper succession plan could be developed and implemented with my full participation. As the meeting adjourned, board members filed out with somber expressions, several pausing to quietly apologize to me for their role in what had transpired. Soon, only Preston and I remained in the conference room. "Why?" I asked simply. When the door closed behind the last board member, Preston couldn't meet my eyes. "I've been your heir apparent for years, Mom. Everyone expected me to take over eventually. But you never talked about retirement, never gave any indication that you were ready to hand over the reins. Every time I brought it up, you changed the subject. So you decided to force my hand, to humiliate me in front of the company I built. It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he insisted, his voice cracking. "Vanessa thought if we presented it as a done deal, you'd accept it gracefully rather than cause a scene. We underestimated you. I underestimated you." "Yes, you did." I gathered my papers slowly, deliberately. "You also betrayed my trust, damaged your own reputation, and potentially harmed the company. Was it worth it?" Preston remained silent, staring at his hands. "I raised you to be better than this," I said quietly. "Your father would be deeply disappointed." At the mention of Terrence, Preston flinched as though I'd struck him. "I know," he whispered. "I know he would." I stood to leave, feeling suddenly exhausted. The victory was hollow. There was no satisfaction in seeing my son brought low, even if it was by his own actions. "What happens now?" Preston asked, looking up at me at last. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard. "Now I go back to my office and begin the process of repairing the damage to our client relationships. The board will appoint an independent investigator to review all documents related to this incident, and you will go home and have a very serious conversation with your wife about boundaries, ethics, and respect." "And us? What about us, Mom?" The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke my resolve. This was my son, my only child, despite his terrible lapse in judgment. "That will take time, Preston. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. For now, we focus on salvaging what we can professionally. The personal relationship." I sighed. "That's a different kind of restoration project altogether." As I walked out of the conference room, employees quickly pretended to be busy with their tasks rather than watching the drama unfold. I made my way to my office, which, thankfully, hadn't yet been completely cleared out, and closed the door behind me, finally allowing myself a moment of privacy to process the emotional whirlwind of the past hour. My phone buzzed with a text from Fatima. "Saw Preston leaving. How did it go?" "I've been reinstated," I replied. "Preston is on leave pending investigation." "Justice served," came her immediate response. "Need anything?" I looked around my partially emptied office, at the blank spaces on the walls where my awards and photographs had hung, at the empty shelves once filled with mementos of a long and successful career. "Yes," I typed. "Help me rebuild." The fallout continued for weeks. The independent investigator uncovered more evidence of Vanessa's involvement, including emails where she detailed her plan to sidetrack B on the day of the board meeting. The investigator's final report painted a picture of a calculated scheme driven primarily by Vanessa, with Preston's reluctant but ultimately willing participation. Through it all, I maintained a rigorous schedule at the office, working tirelessly to reassure clients, stabilize employee morale, and begin the honest succession planning that should have happened in the first place. The board appointed Fatima to a newly created chief of staff position, acknowledging her loyalty and ethical stance during the crisis. At home, the silence was deafening. No Sunday family dinners, no FaceTime calls with my granddaughters, no casual drop-ins from Preston and Vanessa. I told myself it was for the best, that I needed time to process my feelings, to determine whether forgiveness was possible or even desirable. But the truth was simpler and more painful. I missed my family, broken as it was. 6 weeks after the confrontation in the boardroom, as I was preparing a simple dinner for one My doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw my granddaughters, 10-year-old twins Harper and Phoebe, standing nervously in the hallway, clutching what appeared to be handmade cards. I opened the door immediately. "Grandma," they rushed forward in unison, wrapping their arms around my waist. "Girls!" What a wonderful surprise. I embraced them, inhaling the familiar scent of their strawberry shampoo. "Where's your—" "Dad's downstairs in the car," Harper explained, her expression serious beyond her years. "He said we should come up alone first, to see if you'd be willing to talk to him. He's been really sad, Grandma," Phoebe added. "He cries sometimes when he thinks we're asleep." I ushered them inside, my heart constricting at their words. "Tell me truthfully, girls. How are things at home?" The twins exchanged glances before Harper spoke again. "Mom moved out 2 weeks ago. She's staying at Aunt Rachel's condo." This was news to me. "I'm sorry to hear that. It must be difficult for you." Phoebe nodded solemnly. "Dad said they need time apart to think about their choices. And Mom said—" She hesitated. "Mom said, what, sweetheart?" "She said she did a bad thing because she thought it would make our lives better, but instead it made everything worse." I sat down heavily on the sofa, the girls quickly joining me on either side. "Grandma," Harper said, leaning against my shoulder, "Dad really wants to see you. He made us promise not to beg you, but—" She looked up with pleading eyes that were so like Preston's when he was her age. I stroked her hair gently. "I've missed you all very much, even your father, despite everything." Making a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret, I added, "Tell him to come up." The girls beamed, rushing to the door and down the hallway to the elevator. I used the brief time alone to compose myself, straightening the living room and taking a few deep breaths. When the doorbell rang again, I opened it to find Preston standing there, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets, looking thinner and more careworn than when I'd last seen him. "Mom," he said simply. "Preston." I stepped aside to let him in, noticing how the twins immediately flanked him, as though offering silent support. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until Phoebe tugged at my hand. "Grandma, we made you cards. And Dad brought something too." Preston cleared his throat. "Girls, why don't you show Grandma your cards in the kitchen while I set up?" He handed them a small bag. Once they had eagerly pulled me toward the kitchen, Preston retrieved a laptop from his messenger bag and set it on my coffee table. When I returned a few minutes later, having admired the girls' heartfelt artwork, he had pulled up a presentation. "What's this?" I asked, sitting across from him. "A proper succession plan," he replied, his voice quiet but steady. "One that should have been developed collaboratively, with transparency and respect. I've been working on it during my time away from the office." Surprised, I gestured for him to continue. Preston walked me through a thoughtful 5-year transition strategy that gradually shifted responsibilities while respecting my continued value to the company. It included mentorship components, clear metrics for evaluation, and most importantly, regular board check-ins to ensure all parties were comfortable with the pace. "This is actually quite good," I admitted when he finished. "And I had a good teacher," he said, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. "Mom, I know I can't undo what happened. The choices I made, that Vanessa and I made, were inexcusable, but I want to try to make things right, professionally and personally." I studied my son's face, seeing both the boy I had raised and the man he had become. Flawed, yes, but perhaps not beyond redemption. "What about Vanessa?" I asked. The girls mentioned she's staying elsewhere. Preston's expression darkened. "We're re-evaluating our relationship. When everything fell apart at work, when I saw how devastated you were, I started questioning all the decisions that led us there. Vanessa had been pushing for me to take a more aggressive stance about succession for months. I should have recognized the warning signs. You're both responsible for your actions," I said firmly. "I know," he acknowledged. "That's what I've been telling her. She still doesn't fully understand why what we did was so wrong. She sees it as an unfortunate miscalculation, not a fundamental breach of trust." From the kitchen, I could hear the girls chattering as they explored my refrigerator, no doubt looking for the ice cream I always kept for their visits. "Preston," I said carefully, "I won't pretend that everything can go back to normal. What you and Vanessa did hurt me deeply, but you're still my son," I continued, surprised by the crack in my voice. "And those 2 wonderful girls in there are my granddaughters, I don't want to lose that connection, despite everything. Relief washed over Preston's face. Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful for the chance to earn it back. I haven't forgiven you yet, I clarified. But I'm willing to start the process. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our broken trust hanging between us like a tangible thing. Finally, Preston spoke again. The board contacted me yesterday. They've completed their investigation and want me to come in for a final determination next week. And what do you expect that determination to be? I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. He looked down at his hands. Termination, most likely, or at best, a demotion so significant it would make continuing at Harrington Solutions untenable. I nodded slowly. The board's decision was out of my hands. I had recused myself from all discussions regarding Preston's future at the company, but his assessment was probably accurate. And what will you do if that happens? I've had some preliminary discussions with Westbrook Media, he admitted. They've been trying to poach me for years. But to be honest, I'm not sure I'm ready to jump into another high-pressure role right away. This whole experience has made me reevaluate my priorities. From the kitchen came a crash, followed by giggles and hurried whispers. "We're okay," Harper called out. Preston and I exchanged a small smile, the first genuine moment of connection we'd shared in months. "Girls," I called, "why don't you come show your father and me what you've discovered in my kitchen?" The twins appeared in the doorway, Harper holding my half-empty container of premium ice cream, and Phoebe clutching 3 spoons. "We thought maybe—" "Family ice cream," Phoebe suggested tentatively, her eyes darting between Preston and me, as if gauging whether such normalcy was possible. "Family ice cream sounds perfect," I said, making room for them on the sofa, as the girls settled between us, eagerly passing around the container and spoons. I felt something inside me begin to soften. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first fragile step toward healing. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. My assistant's voice came through the intercom, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mrs. Harrington, Vanessa Harrington is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." I paused, considering my options. Part of me wanted to refuse the meeting. Vanessa had been the architect of my humiliation, after all. But another part, perhaps the wiser part, knew that eventually this conversation would need to happen. "Send her in, please." Vanessa entered cautiously, her usual confident stride replaced by tentative steps. She looked immaculate as always, but strain showed around her eyes, and she carried herself with less assurance than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me, B," she said, remaining standing even after I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Vanessa?" She took a deep breath. "I've come to apologize. What I did, what I convinced Preston to do, was unforgivable. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way." I regarded her silently, waiting. Apologies were easy. Genuine remorse was harder to fake. "I thought I was doing what was best for everyone," she continued. "For the company, for Preston, even for you. I convinced myself that you needed permission to retire, that you were holding on out of some misplaced sense of obligation or fear. I was wrong." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You were." Vanessa finally sat down, her composure cracking slightly. "Preston and I are separating." "Did he tell you?" "He mentioned you were staying with Rachel. It's more than that now. We've agreed to a trial separation for 6 months. He says he needs to reevaluate everything, including our marriage." Her voice trembled slightly. "He says he doesn't recognize who we've become together." I felt a surprising twinge of sympathy. Whatever Vanessa's faults, and they were substantial, she clearly loved my son, and I'm sorry to hear that. She looked up sharply. "Are you? I thought you'd be pleased." "Vanessa, contrary to what you might believe, I never wanted my son's marriage to fail. You're the mother of my granddaughters. That will always mean something to me." Tears welled in her eyes. "The girls miss you terribly. They don't understand why everything fell apart so suddenly. They visited me 2 days ago," I informed her. Preston brought them." Surprise flickered across her face, followed by what looked like resignation. "I see. I didn't know. Perhaps you and Preston need to improve your communication," I suggested, not unkindly. Vanessa nodded, wiping discreetly at her eyes. "That's actually part of why I'm here. I'm planning to move back to Seattle for a while. To stay with my parents. I think Preston and I need significant time apart to determine if our marriage can be saved. But I don't want to take the girls away from you, especially now that you and Preston are reconnecting. What are you suggesting? Joint custody, with the girls staying primarily with Preston here in Chicago. I'll have them during school breaks, and we'll reassess at the end of 6 months. She hesitated. Man, it would mean a lot to me, to them, if you could be present in their lives during this transition. They adore you, and they need stability right now. The request surprised me. Despite everything, Vanessa was offering an olive branch of sorts, acknowledging the importance of my relationship with Harper and Phoebe. Of course I'll be there for them, I said. They're my granddaughters. Relief washed over Vanessa's face. Thank you, B. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I truly am sorry. Not just because our plan failed, but because I now understand how deeply wrong it was from the beginning. As she turned to go, I found myself speaking. Vanessa. She looked back. We all make mistakes, I said quietly. The measure of a person is not in avoiding errors, but in how they respond when confronted with them. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Preston always says that's one of your favorite pieces of wisdom. It was something my husband used to say. Terrence believes strongly in second chances. Do you? She asked softly. I considered the question seriously. I'm trying to, for Preston's sake, for the girls, and perhaps even for my own peace of mind. After Vanessa left, I stood at my office window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. So much had changed in the week since that fateful day when my daughter-in-law had driven me to the aquarium instead of my board meeting. My company had nearly been taken from me. My family had fractured. Trust had been broken in ways I never could have imagined. And yet, here I stood, still at the helm of Harrington Solutions. Still, Beatrice Harrington, 75 years old and far from finished. Perhaps there was a lesson in that, about resilience, about the strength that comes from weathering life's storms rather than avoiding them. My phone buzzed with a text from Preston. The girls are asking if you'd like to come over for dinner tomorrow night. No pressure. I smiled as I typed my reply. I'd love to. Tell them to save room for the dessert I'll bring. Baby steps toward a new normal. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The board's decision regarding Preston came the following week. As he had predicted, they determined that his actions warranted termination, but in deference to me, they offered him the option to resign instead. He accepted gracefully, cleaning out his office over the weekend when few employees would witness his departure. It's the right decision, he told me over coffee in my condo that Sunday. I violated the company's trust and the board's. There have to be consequences. I was proud of him for accepting responsibility without bitterness. It showed a maturity I hadn't been sure he possessed. And what will you do now? Focus on the girls for a while. They're struggling with Vanessa's move to Seattle. He hesitated. And I've been thinking about starting my own small consulting practice. Something manageable, ethical, built on the positive lessons I learned from you, not the mistakes I made at the end. I think that sounds like an excellent plan, I said sincerely. With Preston's departure, the board turned their attention to the company's future leadership. The succession plan Preston had developed became the foundation for our discussions, though I insisted on accelerating certain aspects. At 75, I couldn't deny that a transition was indeed necessary, however poorly my son had gone about initiating it. Fatima proved invaluable during this period, helping me evaluate potential internal candidates while maintaining day-to-day operations. 3 months after the failed coup, we presented a comprehensive plan to the board. I would remain as executive director for 1 more year, with Fatima being groomed as my successor. The board approved unanimously. Are you sure about this? Fatima asked later in my office. Like you're still more than capable of running this company. Capable? Yes, I agreed. But it's time, Fatima. Not because I'm too old, or because my mind isn't sharp enough, but because there's more to life than this office. My family needs healing, and I need to be part of that process. Meanwhile, my relationship with Preston gradually improved. Our Sunday dinners resumed, now held at his house with Harper and Phoebe eagerly participating in meal preparation. Sometimes we discussed business. His fledgling consulting practice was beginning to attract clients, but more often we talked about family matters, books we were reading, or the girls' school activities. Vanessa remained in Seattle, video calling the twins several times a week. Occasionally, when I was present during these calls, she would greet me politely, even warmly. The animosity between us hadn't disappeared completely, but it had mellowed into something approaching civility. Mom," Preston said one Sunday evening as we cleared the dinner dishes, the girls having disappeared to finish homework. "I've been meaning to ask you something." "What is it?" He dried his hands on a kitchen towel, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Would you consider joining my consulting practice as an advisor? Not full-time, just lending your expertise on specific projects. Your name and reputation would help establish credibility. And he hesitated. "I miss working with you, when things were good between us." The request surprised me. "Wouldn't that be awkward, after everything that's happened?" "Maybe at first," he acknowledged. "But I've learned some hard lessons about respect and boundaries. I think we could build something new, something better than before." I considered his offer, remembering how satisfying it had been to mentor him during his early years at Harrington Solutions, before ambition and Vanessa's influence had corrupted our professional relationship. "Let me think about it," I said finally. "It's an interesting proposition." That night, alone in my condo, I reflected on Preston's request. Part of me worried that working together again might reopen old wounds or create new tensions. But another part recognized the opportunity it presented, a chance to rebuild our relationship on more equal footing, to pass on my knowledge while respecting his independence. Before making my decision, I called my sister in Arizona. "He betrayed you, B," she reminded me after I explained the situation. "How can you even consider trusting him professionally again?" "Because he's my son," I said simply, "and because I believe people can change when they truly understand the consequences of their actions." "And you think Preston has changed?" I thought about his willingness to accept the board's decision, his focus on the girls, well-being over his career, his careful rebuilding of our personal relationship without pressuring me for forgiveness. "Yes," I said with growing certainty. "I believe he has." The next day, I called Preston to accept his offer, with conditions. I would advise only, not manage. My involvement would be publicly acknowledged, and most importantly, all client communications would be transparent and ethical. He agreed immediately to all terms. 2 weeks later, we signed a formal advisory agreement. As we shook hands across his modest new office desk, I saw in his eyes something I hadn't noticed in years. Not ambition or calculation, but genuine gratitude and respect. "I won't let you down again, Mom," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, and realized I truly believed it. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Vanessa. The subject line read simply, "Thank you. B," she wrote. "Preston told me about your agreement to advise his new firm. I wanted to say thank you for giving him this second chance. He speaks of you with such renewed respect and admiration. The girls tell me how happy he is when you two work together. Like the old days, but better. I know what happened between us can never be fully repaired. But for what it's worth, I'm grateful that you found a way forward with him. The twins need their father whole, and your forgiveness has been a crucial part of his healing. With respect and gratitude, Vanessa." I sat with her message for a long time, surprised by the emotion it stirred in me. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined receiving such a note from the woman who had orchestrated my professional humiliation. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined forgiving my son enough to work with him again. 6 months ago, I had believed my life's work and family relationships were irreparably damaged. Yet here I was, starting a new chapter at 75, still valuable, still contributing, still learning and growing. It wasn't the ending I had expected for my career, nor was it the family dynamic I had envisioned in my later years. But perhaps, I reflected, it was something equally meaningful, a testament to resilience, to the possibility of redemption, to the complex, messy, enduring bonds of family that somehow survive even the deepest betrayals. As autumn painted Chicago in shades of gold and crimson, my life settled into a new rhythm. 3 days a week, I worked at Harrington Solutions, mentoring Fatima and preparing her to assume the executive director role the following spring. 2 days a week, I consulted at Preston's growing firm, Preston Harrington Strategies, where my experience and connections had indeed helped establish credibility with potential clients. The arrangement proved more satisfying than I had anticipated. At Harrington Solutions, I focused on legacy building, ensuring that the company culture and values I had established would continue after my departure. At Preston's firm, I enjoyed the energy of a startup environment without the pressure of full responsibility. The diversity kept my mind sharp and provided a natural transition toward the retirement I was finally beginning to embrace. In October, 6 months after our separation began, Vanessa returned to Chicago for a week to discuss the future with Preston. The girls were ecstatic to have their mother back, even temporarily, and Preston approached the reunion with cautious optimism. "We've been talking more honestly these past few months," he told me the day before her arrival, "really communicating for the first time in years. I think we both understand what went wrong and why." "And do you want to save your marriage?" I asked, careful to keep any judgment from my voice. Preston considered the question seriously. "I think I do. Not for the girls, though they're certainly a factor, but because beneath all the ambition and poor choices, there's still something real between us. Something worth fighting for." Vanessa's visit coincided with Harper and Phoebe's fall break from school, allowing for quality family time. Preston suggested we all have dinner together at his house on her second night in town, a gesture I recognized as significant. He wanted the two women in his life to find peace with each other, even if true friendship might never be possible. I arrived with a bottle of wine and a homemade apple pie, unsure what to expect. Vanessa opened the door, looking somehow both familiar and changed, her designer clothes replaced by more casual attire, her perfect makeup subdued, her demeanor less calculated. "Bea," she greeted me with a genuine smile. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to all of us." The evening was surprisingly comfortable. The girls dominated the conversation with school stories and dance recital plans, their exuberance creating a buffer that allowed the adults to ease into each other's company. After dinner, they insisted on showing Vanessa and me a performance they had choreographed, giving Preston and me a moment alone in the kitchen. "How are things going?" I asked quietly, helping him load the dishwasher. "Better than I expected," he admitted. "We've had some long talks. She's different, Mom. More reflective. Seattle has been good for her. She's been volunteering at an arts center for disadvantaged youth, something she never would have considered before." I nodded, remembering how crisis often catalyzes genuine change. "And you? Are you different too?" He smiled ruefully. "I'd like to think so. Less concerned with status and position, more focused on integrity and relationships. Working with you again has reminded me of why I wanted to be in business in the first place. Not for power, but to create something meaningful, something that helps others." From the living room came the sound of applause as the girls finished their dance, followed by Vanessa's warm praise. A moment later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway. "The girls want ice cream to go with your pie, Bea. They're insisting that family dessert requires all 4 of us." The phrase, "all 4 of us," lingered in my mind as we joined the twins in the dining room. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and pain, we were still a family, changed, perhaps permanently, but still connected. As winter approached, bringing with it Chicago's legendary winds and the first dusting of snow, another change emerged. Vanessa accepted a position with the Seattle Arts Center where she'd been volunteering, a job that would begin in January. After much discussion with Preston and the girls, they decided to attempt a bi-coastal marriage. Vanessa would remain in Seattle, Preston and the twins would stay in Chicago, and they would alternate visits every few weeks, with longer stays during school breaks. "It's unconventional," Preston acknowledged when he told me about their decision. "But it actually addresses many of the issues that led to our problems in the first place. Vanessa needs space to develop her own identity outside of being my wife and the girls' mother, and I need to prove, to her and to myself, that I can be a present, engaged father while building my business ethically." I was skeptical but supportive. "If anyone can make it work, you two can. You've always been determined when you set your minds to something." December brought a development I hadn't anticipated. Fatima, my chosen successor at Harrington Solutions, received a job offer from a major technology firm, a C-level position with compensation and challenges that far exceeded what our company could provide. "I don't want to leave you in the lurch," she said, clearly torn. "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You must take it," I insisted immediately. "You've more than earned this chance." With Fatima's impending departure, the board reconvened to discuss succession options. The most qualified internal candidate was Gregory Patel, our chief financial officer. who had maintained a neutral stance during Preston's attempted coup and had since proven himself both capable and ethical. During the board meeting to discuss Gregory's potential appointment, Desmond Wells asked a question that caught me off guard. Before we proceed, Mrs. Harrington, there's something we should clarify. Given recent events with Preston's new firm and your advisory role there, would you be comfortable with Gregory's appointment? Or would you prefer to extend your tenure while we conduct a broader search? The room fell silent, as all eyes turned to me. The implication was clear. They were concerned about another Harrington family connection influencing company leadership. I appreciate the question, Desmond, I said carefully. Dia, my advisory role with Preston's firm is strictly limited and fully transparent. It has no bearing on Harrington Solutions, operations, or leadership. I believe Gregory is exceptionally qualified, and I support his appointment without reservation. My retirement plans remain unchanged. The tension in the room dissipated, and the vote to appoint Gregory as the next executive director passed unanimously. As we adjourned, several board members approached to express their appreciation for my handling of the situation. You've navigated an incredibly difficult period with remarkable grace, Lydia Chen told me. The company is stronger for it, and so, I think, are you. Her words stayed with me as I drove home through gently falling snow. I was indeed stronger. Not despite the betrayal and its aftermath, but because of it. The experience had forced me to confront questions I'd been avoiding for years, about legacy, about identity beyond work, about the complexity of familial love even in the face of profound disappointment. As I entered my condo, my phone chimed with a text from Preston. The girls want to know if you're free for Christmas cookie baking this weekend. Vanessa sent her special recipe from Seattle. I smiled as I replied, wouldn't miss it for the world. At 75, my life looked nothing like I had imagined it would a year ago. And yet, as I gazed out at the snow-covered city, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for much of my career. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead become a catalyst for growth. For myself, for Preston, even for Vanessa. We were all, in our own ways, finding paths forward that would have been unimaginable before the day she drove me to the wrong place. Spring arrived in Chicago with its characteristic unpredictability. Warm, sunny days followed by sudden cold snaps. Brilliant blooms emerging despite lingering patches of snow. It seemed an apt metaphor for my life as I approached my official retirement date at Harrington Solutions. The transition to Gregory's leadership had proceeded smoothly. He had a different management style than mine, more collaborative, less decisive, but the results were impressive. Under his guidance, the company had secured 2 major new clients and expanded our digital services division, all while maintaining the ethical standards I had established decades earlier. Preston's consulting firm had grown steadily, now employing 5 people besides himself. My advisory role had evolved from hands-on client work to broader strategic guidance, allowing me to scale back my involvement to just 1 day a week. He had proven himself worthy of the second chance I'd given him, building a business based on integrity rather than expediency. The bi-coastal arrangement between Preston and Vanessa had defied my expectations by actually strengthening their marriage. The distance seemed to have restored the appreciation and respect that had eroded during their years of constant proximity and ambition. When Vanessa visited Chicago monthly, I sometimes joined them for dinner, finding her company increasingly agreeable as she continued her personal evolution away from the calculating woman who had once plotted my professional downfall. Most significantly, my relationship with Harper and Phoebe had deepened. With Preston frequently handling the firm's business alone and Vanessa based in Seattle, I had become a more constant presence in the twins' lives, helping with homework, attending their performances, occasionally staying at Preston's house when he traveled overnight for client meetings. The week before my official retirement, the company organized a celebration at the Chicago Art Institute, a venue I had always loved. Colleagues past and present attended, along with clients, competitors who had become friends over the years, and, of course, my family. Preston and the girls arrived early to help with final arrangements, while Vanessa flew in from Seattle specifically for the event. As I circulated through the elegant reception, accepting congratulations and reminiscing about memorable projects, I found myself surprisingly emotional. This company had been my life's work, my identity for so long. Letting go, even under ideal circumstances, was bittersweet. Gregory gave a touching speech about my contributions and legacy. Fatima, visiting from her new position in California, shared amusing anecdotes about our years working together. Even Desmond Wells, now the longest-serving board member, rose to offer his perspective on my leadership through changing times. Then, unexpectedly, Preston stepped to the microphone. "Many of you know that my mother and I have had our professional differences," he began, drawing a few knowing chuckles from those familiar with our history. "What you might not know is how those challenges ultimately became the catalyst for profound growth, for both of us." He looked directly at me as he continued. "My mother taught me many things over the years, but perhaps the most important lesson came not during my time at Harrington Solutions, but after I left. She showed me that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising after a fall. That integrity, once compromised, can be rebuilt through consistent actions. That forgiveness, while never owed, can be the greatest gift one person can offer another." My vision blurred with unshed tears as he raised his glass. To Beatrice Harrington, founder, leader, mentor, and most importantly, a mother whose capacity for both accountability and grace has shaped not just a company, but generations to come. The room erupted in applause as Preston made his way to my side, embracing me tightly. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear, "for everything." Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found myself alone for a moment in the museum's Impressionist gallery. Vanessa approached quietly, 2 champagne flutes in hand. "One last toast?" she offered, extending a glass. I accepted with a nod, and we stood side by side, gazing at Monet's water lilies. "I've never properly apologized to you, have I?" Vanessa said after a comfortable silence. "Not in a way that acknowledges the full scope of what I did." "You've changed your behavior," I replied. "Sometimes that speaks louder than words." She turned to face me directly. "Nevertheless, I need to say it. What I did was inexcusable. Not just driving you to the wrong place that day, but the months of planning, the manipulation of Preston, the complete disregard for your dignity and contribution. I was so focused on what I thought our family needed that I lost sight of basic decency." I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse where once I would have expected calculation. "Why did you do it, Vanessa?" "Really?" She considered the question carefully. "I believed I was protecting our future. Preston's, the girls', my own. You seemed immovable, this permanent fixture at the company's helm, with no space for Preston to truly advance. But that wasn't the whole truth." She paused, sipping her champagne. "I was also jealous of your relationship with Preston, the way he admired you, sought your approval. I wanted to be the primary influence in his life, and you were always there, this formidable presence." Her honesty surprised me. "And now?" A small smile touched her lips. "Now I understand that there's room for both of us in his life. Different roles, different influences, both valuable." The irony is that I only realized this after I moved 2,000 miles away. We fell silent again, watching other guests drift through the gallery. Finally, Vanessa spoke again. "Will you ever fully forgive us, B?" It was a question I had asked myself many times over the past year. "I already have," I said, realizing the truth of it only as I spoke the words. Not because what happened wasn't serious, it was, but because holding on to that pain serves no purpose. You and Preston have worked to make amends. The girls deserve a family not fractured by old resentments. And I smiled slightly. I find I sleep better without carrying that weight. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. As we rejoined the others, I felt a sense of completion, not just of my professional career, but of a difficult personal chapter. The betrayal that had once seemed so devastating had ultimately led to something unexpected. A more authentic relationship with my son, a surprising rapport with my daughter-in-law, and a deeper connection with my granddaughters. My retirement day itself was beautifully anticlimactic. I handed over my office keys to Gregory, collected the few remaining personal items from my desk, and walked out of Harrington Solutions as its founder rather than its leader, a distinction that felt significant and right. Preston and the girls were waiting outside with a small surprise. Tickets for all of us to visit the Shed Aquarium the following day. "We thought it might be nice to replace that memory," Preston explained. "To go there as a family, by choice this time." The next morning, as we wandered through the aquarium's exhibits, I watched Harper and Phoebe press their faces against the glass of the Caribbean reef tank, exclaiming over colorful fish and swaying coral. Preston stood beside me, pointing out particularly interesting specimens to the girls with the same enthusiasm he'd shown as a child on our visits here decades ago. "Are you happy, Mom?" he asked quietly, as the twins moved ahead to the next exhibit. I considered the question seriously. At 76, I had experienced profound success and bitter betrayal. I had built a company and seen it continue without me. I had lost trust in my only child, and then, gradually, painfully, rebuilt that relationship into something perhaps more honest than before. Yes, I answered with certainty, and not despite everything that's happened, but because of it. I've learned that resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about finding meaning through it. Preston nodded thoughtfully. The girls asked me something interesting last night. They wanted to know if, when they grow up, they could work at your company someday. And what did you tell them? That Harrington Solutions isn't Grandma's company anymore. It belongs to all the people who work there now. But that the values you built it on, integrity, excellence, resilience, those will always be part of our family legacy. Those are things they can carry forward wherever their paths lead. As we watched the twins excitedly pointing out a passing sea turtle, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. My career had been just one chapter in a much longer story. What mattered most wasn't the title I had held or even the company I had built, but the values I had lived by and passed on, values that had been tested by betrayal and ultimately strengthened through forgiveness. "You know," I said to Preston, "your father used to say that a person's true character is revealed not when things go right, but when they go terribly wrong." Preston smiled ruefully. "Then I suppose we've all had our character thoroughly revealed this past year. And rebuilt," I added, linking my arm through his as we followed the girls toward the next adventure. "That's the part that matters most." The end.